All right, welcome everyone. This is David Morgan of the Morgan Report. And today we're going to talk about the gold standard DAO. And this has got me really excited. So I have Kash, who is one of the founders of putting the DAO together. And of course, the most obvious question, Kash, is what is a DAO?
That's a very good question. Very good question. So DAO stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organization. And basically what that means is we're giving power back to the people by giving them a vote on how our organization works. So instead of a board of directors or a central group of decision makers deciding the direction of a project or a business, this is now back to the power of the people. So again, yeah, decentralized autonomous organization. We now have the vote to choose where our products and services go.
So the follow-up question is, how could it be autonomous? I mean, the idea, of course, the initiation of Bitcoin, and I won't go into the history, but the whole idea being decentralized, but as time wore on, it was more and more centralized, meaning that there was this KYC, know your customer, and almost all these things are done through exchanges. I'm well aware of the fact that you can be autonomous on the web with cryptos, but it's really difficult to do so. I mean, most people just go through the KYC. So how does that work?
It's a good question. Yeah, with things like KYC and these procedures that kind of take it away from being fully decentralized. I think there needs to be a bit of a balance between decentralized and sometimes having some centralized aspects to something. So for example, with KYC and voting power, what KYC does is it just makes sure that the voting power cannot be spammed. So it kind of protects the voting rights of those participating through the KYC. These KYCs, they're done through third-party companies that specialize in this type of information verification. So it never gets sold. It doesn't get sold to other companies and things like that. It's still very private information. So yeah, regarding the decentralized side of things, at the end of the day, all it takes is a crypto wallet address to connect to this, platform, to this system. And a lot of people choose not to go the KYC route as well. Just keep it fully decentralized. So it's an interesting area. It's still very new, and it's still being developed. It's growing and developing very quickly, actually. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see, where the governance tokens go with these systems. Yeah.
I see. I understand. I appreciate that. We don't need any more web bot or spams in anywhere really.
That's right.
So
that's right.
Yeah. The next question is, how is this going to enhance the crypto world?
Yeah, that's a good question. So again, the crypto world is shifting and evolving very quickly. Pre-governance token era, the governance tokens are the things that give you the vote in a DAO. Before this time, everything was decided by a central team, and you had no power, you had no decision making for the project. Ultimately, we're the people investing in the project and have our investments on the line. So now what it does is it gives us a voice. And puts things more in the community's hands or in the investors' hands that are actually holding this project token or holding this currency. So it makes the team behind the project like servants on behalf of the community. So it shifts the organization structure. It's very cool, very cool. It takes it from having a board of directors deciding everything to now the people. The people decide everything, and the board has to act on behalf of the people. So in a nutshell, brings more power to the people. Yeah.
Yes, it does. Well, I'm kind of mixed on that. And I'll just vent a bit here. There is a book, and I just read the synopsis, the cliff notes of it, the wisdom of crowds. And it was very interesting on this study that they found that the wisdom of crowds actually was about the most accurate way to predict timelines, what the future looked like. It's very interesting. So I won't dwell on it, but I would sum it up in that way. With so many failed attempts on a gold standard, why do you think it's possible now?
That's a good question. Yeah, so many failed attempts on the gold standard. What's different with it now? I think the main problem with the gold standard, I remember reading about in England. I have to get the exact king's name, but I remember in England they did have the gold standard until the king took all of the gold out of the treasury and used it to pay for his debts. So there was a massive upright in England because of the king doing this. The central decision maker pretty much stole everybody's funds. So the trust wasn't there. I think that's one of the main issues, is the trust is not there. They ended up killing this king in the end. So the difference with it now is going back to the governance aspect and the DAO side of things. It brings that power and the transparency back to the people.
Let me stop you there. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just had a really important thought. When the DAO is up and going, can you buy your way in for more power? In other words, if I have X amount of contribution, do I have a bigger vote than someone that had a lesser contribution? That's important to know.
In a way, yes. In a way, yes. It's a little bit more deeper into that aspect. So how it works is the amount of governance votes or tokens you have get rolled into one. So the amount doesn't really matter of how much the amount couldn't really make too much of a difference unless it was another decentralized organization accumulating those votes. Then that other organization or persons could outvote and basically decide the direction of the DAO that they just, outvoted through accumulating their own governance tokens. It's very interesting. It's a very interesting space at the moment, and it's how some DAOs are actually working at the moment. There's something called the curve wars, and basically it's basically a race for these other DAOs to accumulate as much as they can of this curve token, because it basically gives them voting power and the direction, the ability to change the direction in their favor, which is very interesting. I think it's very interesting. So, yeah, there is that side to it. There is that side to it for sure, for sure. Okay. And it'll be interesting to see how we mitigate these kind of things and set boundaries and rules around this kind of stuff. It's still a very new space, but it's something to definitely keep an eye out for.
Well, as you know, full disclosure, I contributed to the gold standard DAO. There was a limit on how much you could contribute, which I think is a good idea. It's sort of like, let's say a private placement on a junior mining company as a quick example. And the way it's set up is no one entity, one trust, one fund, one human can really buy in more than a certain amount and therefore not have control from the very start. In other words, let's take the stock market as a quick example, but if you own, 53% of the shares, you have a controlling interest. And just as we just discussed, you might be able to point the company in a direction that maybe isn't the most popular, but you have the majority of the votes. So we're kind of like that at the beginning, weren't we? I mean, I contributed the maximum, but I don't think anyone could outrun me. A lot of people contributed what I did, which from my perspective was a fairly modest sum. It wasn't, a schoolboy investment, but it wasn't so much that I was uncomfortable. So tell me what happens. Tell me two things. One is, was I correct in what I just stated? that no one can really overtake the other one because of the limit to start with. And then on top of that, what happens after that money is, or really the gold is how we started it. And I used the LODE AGX, excuse me, I used the LODE AUX, I got to know what symbols, to contribute to the DAO project. So that was a mouthful. Can you break that down?
Tell me about it. Absolutely. So yeah, so we did set limits, buy limits initially, for the IDO participants buying in, just because the IDO price is basically it's the cheapest price that you could buy it at before it hits the market. So giving early investors that advantage, you have to be careful with how much they can buy, how much position they can take in the total supply. So yeah, so we did set those limits at the start just to make sure that that it's an even playing field for all investors. So yeah, basically how that works is with the AUX that was provided into the DAO, that then goes into the treasury. And once we launch the mainnet, the tokens that that early investors purchased, the GSD tokens that early investors purchased, you'll then be able to stake them and receive your rebasing rewards, daily rebasing rewards for staking. Or staking is like another word of saying you're putting these funds into a savings account. That's basically what they mean when they say staking.
Okay, so I get that part. Sorry to interrupt, but so I get that part. So I've staked my investment. You have it in the treasury. Now, somehow or another, there's some friction in the system that offers what I'll call a yield, if I'm allowed to use that term in the crypto world.
Yeah.
And I want to know, how does that happen? I mean, what are we doing that's causing, some increase in value?
Yes. It's a very interesting way it all works. There's a lot of moving parts, but basically this is how it works. So when a user goes to mint the GSD token, they're providing the AUX or other assets that will be intaking into the treasury. But basically, they provide the AUX at a premium price to what the base value of each token is backed by. So each GSD token is roughly backed by $1.60 worth of AUX. That means if a user is minting GSD at $100, for example, there's that much difference for the premium. That premium is what is used to pay out people that are staking. So it's this constant wheel that keeps turning between bonders getting a small discounted price on the GSD for providing their assets, but it's still at a premium. And then that premium is what is used to pay out rewarders for staking. That's one part of the puzzle. Another aspect that we've added into the treasury, which is very smart. It means the treasury just keeps growing over time. We've added interest-bearing assets into our treasury as well. So that means no matter what, our treasury will be growing at a stable rate of 5 to 10, potentially 15% annually because of these interest-bearing assets. That's another topic I can go down the rabbit hole of a bit later. But yeah, basically that's where the revenue comes from. There's a lot of aspects to our treasury and how it produces revenue. For example, one of them is our non-fungible token auction that we're getting ready as well, which funds are used to go back into the treasury and burn GSD tokens. So we burn the actual supply of these GSD, making the ones that are circulating more valuable. A lot of moving parts, but yeah, that's basically the base of it, how it works. The minting. Yeah,
I wanted a top level, and you did that. I think it's deep enough. So for those that don't know, what is a GSD?
Love it. So GSD is It's a digital reserve currency that is backed by gold. It is mainly backed by AUX. AUX is a tokenized version of gold that's done through LODE 1. So yeah, so these tokens basically back our GSD token, and it's a rebasing token, which means it grows in value through the rewards. Basically giving users interest on their AUX, and gold.
Well, thank you for that. I'm going to go ahead and take a stab at this, and correct me if I'm wrong. I'm going to try to break it down really simply. So I'm just going to pretend we're on an absolute gold standard. There is no fiat. There are no warehouse receipts for your gold. It's just gold. So if I'm a goldsmith in the old days and I'm providing a service, and you deposit 10 ounces of gold with me, and I charge 1% annually for storing your gold with me, I get that paid in gold. So if you withdraw after 1 year, as an example, you get 99% of your gold, and I get to keep 1% because that was a contract and we settled in gold only. So if I could be so bold, it sounds as if on a real basic level, we're sort of attempting the same thing here. And the only way that it works is because there is a fee for a service or a function, which is only normal business. I really dislike the idea that I get once in a while that, I should give out everything that I've known, everything I've studied, everything I've done for the last 40 plus years for free. No, I have to eat too, So
Yeah,
therefore, on my paid service, I charge. I do a lot for free, and I'm happy to do it. But you know what? The dog likes to eat as well. So I've got, reason, and that's how business works. I mean, now you could go to an extreme and be, profit means everything, which I think, unfortunately, we're at in a lot of instances. And I don't want to get too philosophical, but did I more or less nail the basic concept?
Basically, yeah, basically. So the difference now between the blacksmith taking the 1% for holding the gold for you is now we know the blacksmith earns more than 1% for taking that gold for you. So we know what he's doing. We can see everything because it's decentralized and everything can be seen on the blockchain. So basically, now instead of him taking the 1%, what happens is he takes that 1%, he uses it to create other things, and then we take a portion of that additional profit, and the 1% comes back to us, but even greater. So it's a really cool system how it works. It's our attempt at bringing the gold standard back. And we think that we're getting closer to achieving this from the technology available these days. So yeah.
Well, thanks. I pretty much knew that, not that, but I thought maybe with asking the right question and you responding, it makes it, to me, it's crystal clear now. So thank you for that. I think you have some questions, some basic questions for me about, the old days, the gold standard, and what happened and why it worked or didn't work. If you want to go ahead and shoot a few at me, I'm willing to take some shots. And thank you for the information. I think at least it's clear to me, and I really like the idea of giving power back to the people. Of course, anyone that's known me for a few months knows that's one of my primary goals in life, is to see the money elite segregated from the power that they have over us and put it back to the people.
Absolutely. It's I think it's interesting, the timing of things. This could have happened years ago. It could have been delayed by a certain time as well, but the time is now. The technology is available now, and I think with what's happening around the world at the moment, very interesting balance to things, is what I can say. But yeah, no, I did have a couple of questions that I was going to throw your way, just for those that don't know. What was the gold standard in your words, and why was it so important?
Well, the reason it was so important is trust. I mean, you can always hear people on monetary theory talk about money can be anything. And certainly through monetary history, it has been, seashells and salt and, cow hides and tally sticks and all this stuff. But if you get down to the basics, there's really two theories of money. One is it's a contract only, and the other is specie. It's something you can put in your hand and it has value. And that's been throughout the ages, thousands of years. The populace, the people have voted gold and silver. And without going too deep, a bimetallic or trimetallic standard works better than a gold only standard. But I'm going to call the gold standard a gold coin standard. And the reason I'm going to do that is because I don't want to get involved with certificates that represent gold and a partial gold backing and all that has taken place. So in a true gold standard, where there is no hypothecation of gold, what happens is you have stable prices for a very long time. And of course, prices generally ebb and flow, and it can. I mean, it doesn't mean every price is locked into a constant. It isn't. You might have a higher wheat production one year and wheat prices fall. You might have a time when the corn crop is destroyed and corn prices go higher. I mean, it's the ebb and flow of the physical economy. But gold primarily and silver as well have been proven to maintain their purchasing power or their value over long periods of time. And there's no funny business. I mean, when you have a gold standard, you don't have to have a financial plan or assume a rate of inflation. You know, from the day you're born to the day you die, that this ounce of gold will buy you this much in goods and services. Again, the prices could vary somewhat. But generally speaking, people become more efficient over time, which means that the coat that you bought when you were, or your parents gave you when you're 5 years old, when you're 50 years old and you get a coat, it's probably better made, higher quality, maybe last longer. That's the general trend. So actually, the function of the economy is to make things better and better over time. Now, that's the idealized situation, and that works, but it also has flaws, and you get a lot of. I've got a lot of blowback over the years that the gold standard doesn't work. Gold is an inert element voted by the masses for thousands of years as one of the best monies. And so how could it be gold's fault? It's just an element, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's wrong with it is the human element, where someone claims to have more gold than actually exists, or they clip the corners of it, or they counterfeit it, they add gross metal to it, or there's lots of things in the human realm that invalidate the purity of a pure gold coin standard. So can it have flaws? Yeah, it can, if there's a human element that tries to, let's say, be dishonest in some way, shape, or form. But if that doesn't exist, and of course, in theory, it could, I suppose, you've got a pretty good system that's benefit and equal to almost everyone.
That's very interesting. Very interesting. That is the best explanation of the gold standard I have ever heard. And it just really gets you thinking about why is something that since as old as time has been so precious. Why are we not using this as a monetary system? Why is this not part of our monetary system? If it's so precious and does so well over time, what are we doing? Why is it that we're looking at assets that are depreciating now, like the US dollar and basically all our currencies? I don't know. It's it makes you ask a few questions. And going back to the trusting, I guess. And the power of a DAO. Very interesting. Very interesting.
Well, the main function, I think there's two things: lack of knowledge, so not really knowing what it really entails, and misplaced trust. So if you are trusting the banker, let's say, and you deposit your gold, or the goldsmith, and you get a certificate, so you have to have a kind of a claim. There has to be some mechanism, to know that, I've deposited 10 gold coins in your bank. So you get a receipt. And then of course people started changing those receipts, and the banker realized that the receipts were being exchanged, but there's really hardly anyone ever coming back for the gold. So there was the ability to distort the system and print up more certificates or receipts than really gold backing it. And that's really the failure of the system, was that people cheated on it. But it's so important that we keep the system, transparent above board. And I think that's where this new technology becomes vitally important, that with the blockchain, it really isn't a way to cheat. It's transparent. Everybody knows what's really there. So
Absolutely.
I think if there's ever been an age to bring the old world and a new world together in a manner where the human elements basically remove, then you probably, at least in my mind and in theory, would have a system that was so flawless that the benefits of having a specie money would be so valuable that I think it could cause, and this is of course my bias, a revolution in the monetary sphere, where the best way to understand real money is the ownership theory of money, where what you have on the blockchain, you actually own it. And the bank doesn't own it, you own it.
I agree. That's very interesting. The history and the present match so well. With the trustless issues that you're mentioning, Dave, and where we're at today. You can't forge, you can't hack, you can't really hack or forge blockchain transactions, and everything is transparent. I can't write a fake receipt. I can't trick the system. So, and everybody can check my address. They can see, what everybody's doing. Everything's transparent. We just don't have our names attached to our wallets, which is probably a good thing, but for privacy reasons. But very interesting how it matches with today. The technological advancements of today and how it works now. Very interesting. The next question I had was why did we get off of a gold standard? Why did we get rid of it? What did Bretton Woods really mean for us?
Well, the reason we got off of it is because what I've already outlined, they were cheating. So the Bretton Woods system was after World War II, was Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. The world powers at the time after the war sat around and decided how to structure the new monetary system. It was based on a gold exchange standard, not a gold coin standard. The gold exchange standard said that we would fix the price of gold based on the US dollar. So the US dollar, 35 of those pieces of paper would yield 1 ounce of gold. And that was the de facto gold standard that went on from Bretton Woods on. And as long as everyone abided by that, then things would probably continue to still be on it. The problem is that the United States reneged on the contract and started printing up more dollars than there were gold to back it up. And a economist named Ruff, I forget his first name, had the ear of Charles de Gaulle and explained to him what was really going on. And so France and the UK, others were starting to call United States dollars bluff and said, well, if these things are worth, 35 of these things are worth 1 ounce of gold, I'll take the gold. You can keep the paper. And once that started to take place, Nixon was really forced to close the gold window. Of course, when he did it, he said it was temporary, which of course was a lie. And lastly, it was based on the full faith and credit of the United States, which really is a summation of the full faith and credit of the United States means the ability of the federal government to tax their citizens. So to take part of their labor to back up whatever debt was carried out by the federal government. So that's what it meant. So it broke down because they cheated. It's usually the reason that the gold standard fails isn't gold's fault. It's the human element, as I said before. And Bretton Woods was really a good system for a while, as long as the parameters were pretty much adhered to, which, as I just said, were not.
Interesting. It sounds like someone made a mistake in the office and then they just kept running with it after that. Okay. Very interesting. Okay. It's interesting how you're saying, it ties back into the tax, and then even other countries started to see what was going on there and said, okay, we'll just buy the gold then. We kind of see what's happening here, and we'll take the valuable the valuable asset over the fake one. So yeah, okay. And that brings us to where we're at today. Why do you think it's been so difficult to get back to a gold standard? I think trust is kind of the main theme here with having a gold standard running. Would you agree? Do you think it's because more of it's been a trust issue and a central power issue to bring the gold standard back? Why is it not around at the moment?
Yeah. Well, I could probably give you 5 different arguments, but I'll try to keep it succinct. Yeah, trust is obviously one of them, and it gets to the point where all fiat fails, and the reason all fiat fails is there's a loss of trust. It's really that simple. So the idea is that at some point in the future, there'll be enough mistrust. Doesn't mean 51%, it could be 1%, that decides, I don't trust what this dollar is going to be worth a year from now or 6 months from now, or I don't trust what's going to be worth at the end of the week, which is what's happened in Venezuela, Turkey, Argentina numerous times. A lot of countries that don't have the GDP of the United States or have the reserve currency status fail. So that's the main thesis or fact, really, that determines what happens. And why is it hard to get back on? Well, number one, the bankers love having the control of being able to have a counterfeiting machine that everyone has to accept because they have the power of government behind them. So the bankers are an elite class by themselves outside of any government authority. Yet every government authority on the planet is also an enforcer for the banking elite. In other words, you have to accept their script that they print for basically nothing, and you're required to use it to make purchases, pay your taxes, pay your utility bill, get a mortgage, etc. And if you don't, then the governments, in whatever jurisdiction, will be breathing down your neck, as a metaphor, to make sure that you abide by the rules that are really set by the bankers and enforced again by the respective governments. So to get back, what you have to do is you have to admit the lie, just like Nixon did, but he did it subtly. He just said, I'm closing the gold window, didn't really explain why. The bankers would have to put the amount of credit creation that they've had over decades into a value that was commensurate with the amount of printing that they've done. And if you do the math in the United States, it comes out, depending on how you do the math, there's several ways to look at it. M1, base money only, what's actually printed, what the M1 money supply is, what the M2 money supply. Some people go as far as the M3. You can look those things up, people, on the internet. I'm not going to dive that deep. But it's the money supply and the amount of gold. So you have to peg the price of gold up to, let's say, 15,000 an ounce, which is quite high in US dollar terms. And that would balance the amount of paper that's out there. It's been printed since we went off the gold standard, August 15th, 1971, till now. And so it would expose their lie that a dollar is a dollar, because a dollar isn't a dollar. A dollar's been, printed. Everyone knows this. But the bankers have no problem doing it because they already own most of the assets. So really, to them, it's a game that they get to win in most cases in monetary history, because if you own General Motors and Dow Chemical and DuPont and the meat manufacturing plants and a couple of high-tech firms and everything else, you really don't care what the price is because you own the value or the real wealth. Remember, gold and silver are a representative wealth, although they have value in and of themselves, especially silver. They are a means to conduct business or conduct private enterprise. And they're cherished and they're rare and they're hard to get. And therefore, they work as money better than anything else so far. So the idea is to go back would be a real difficult thing, because the elitists, the banking cartel, gets to basically run the world because they have the ability to basically buy votes, buy governments, buy the media. They can buy just about anything they want. And if you control the cognitive map, if you control the way people think about money, and you get the majority convinced that money is whatever the government tells you it is, or whatever the bankers tell the government to tell the people it is, you've got total control. But there's always the, intellectual class and others, don't have to be an intellectual, but people that could think on their own or use their own thinking ability and discernment to realize or do just a cursory study on the history of money and realize these things never work. And the bankers know that. And that's why we're actually pushed into this new system is at the end of the great inflations, there's always an alternative that pops up. And the one that popped up and the one, of course, I was on was, precious metals. It's, my passion. But what actually took place is that got pushed a bit to the side and along came the cryptocurrency sphere, which really has been around a little more than 10 years, but it's been highly adopted, especially by the millennial class. And now what I see, and of course I am biased, but I'm also a pretty good thinker, at least I think so, that the melding of the two is something so powerful that once the millennials, or let's say the majority of crypto types, just understand what the power of gold is and the power of the blockchain and combine them, I think we have an unstoppable force and will, at least in theory, and I hope in reality, produce a product that puts the power of money back into people's hands. And I don't think there's much that the powers that be can do about it, because by the time we have accumulated a, let's say, substantial amount of real money, there's probably not a whole lot that that the elite could come in and do other than acquiesce and maybe bring up a competing currency that is, let's say, central bank digital currency that is also tied to the price of gold or tied to the gold. So that's how I see it. Maybe a bit optimistic. I've always been a bit of an idealist. I like to think these things through. I like to see the long-term play. And I am really thrilled, Kash, that you and your team have been able to come to us. And full disclosure, I am an ambassador for LODE, and I did invest, as I said earlier. But this is one of my main passions: is how do we put the power back to the people? And you have provided a solution. So I commend you and the team for that.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, we appreciate being involved in this, and just having the opportunity to serve the community. Hopefully, if we can bring back what was lost and bring the power back to the people. The thing about bringing the power back to the people is the people always had the power. We just didn't know, right? All the volume comes from us.
Yes.
How does the wheel turn? It turns from the people.
From our labor, yes.
Isn't it? Yeah, from our labor. So we've just been harnessed in a different way this whole time, where it hasn't benefited us, and it's only benefited a select few where they've set up these systems that just keep feeding them and taking from us. So I think from what you were saying before, it's very interesting, because I think it started with the gold and silver community. They started to realize that what the dollar was backed behind, started losing faith behind what was backed behind the dollar. So they started moving closer to gold and silver. And like you're saying, crypto has only been around for about 10 years or so. I think that just accelerated that way of thinking. That kind of just accelerated people opening their eyes and seeing the value of the monetary system and where real value lies. So the marriage of these two communities and these two ideas, 10 years later, at the time we're at now, I think is very special and very interesting to see how it's going to unfold and how it's going to benefit everybody. So very excited to see us, the power, be harnessed the right way and have things working for us, not against us.
Well, as the old expression goes, from your lips to God's ears. I mean, what will it look like 10 years hence? We already know what Bitcoin looks like from, inception to 10 years out. What happens with the gold DAO 10 years out? And we're not going to be the only ones. There'll be others, I'm sure, or I'm guessing, but pretty certain there will be. And it will be very interesting, because the monetary system needs to be changed. And the real question is, who's going to change it? Are the people going to change it, or the bank's going to change it? And the answer is both. And what we don't know at this point in time is who wins. And I'm still optimistic enough to think that we have the power, as you said. I totally agree. And if we just don't have, ignore their system, and that's tough because, as I said earlier, they have the power of force. Government is force, and they can force you to do something that you wouldn't do normally of your free will. And that's a very big flaw in all governments. But I digress. I'll give it back to you, Kash. It's been a fascinating conversation. I hope that, I think we've each contributed a great deal for our audience to think about, consider. And I will just give a caution. Anytime there's a new adoption of any new idea, any new monetary system, I would say tread lightly, but tread. I don't think you want to be left behind. But just because you like the idea and you're very libertarian in your thoughts, as an example, you don't have to be to adopt this. This is for everybody, regardless of your political slant. But tread lightly, put your toe in the water, get it, accustomed to it, and then you might go in further, wade out into your, ankles and your knees. You don't have to dive in all the way. But I do think that this is something that's so vital to perhaps the ability to change the course of monetary history that you ought to at least be familiar with it, question it, examine it, and then make a decision.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, I absolutely agree, and thank you so much for having us on as well, David. It has been one of the most insightful conversations I've been able to have with somebody. So really do appreciate the time that you've given us today as well. And absolutely agree. Like with treading carefully in this kind of stuff. It reminds me when TVs first came out. I'm sure everybody thought that they were weird or it was unhealthy or you shouldn't sit too close to the TV. All these kind of things. But you look now and we basically have them glued to our eyes and they're everywhere. So it is a very new thing today. But it might be something worth keeping your eye on. I agree. Because this might be how it's glued to your eyes in the next 10 years.
Well, one more thing, and I'm sure we'll probably put some show notes on this conversation, but where do we go to find out more about the gold standard DAO?
Yeah, so if you want to find some more information about Gold Standard DAO, the best place to check is our website at gsdao.org. We're just in the process of updating our website at the moment, just as a heads up. But very shortly we'll have all our updated information on there, roadmaps, tokenomics, and links to more information that you can find. So, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Kash, for the conversation back and forth. And you did test my knowledge as you probed, which is good. It's really good. And it's not difficult, but, it takes a little thought on my part. You got to do it real time to try to make it, understandable for everybody, because monetary affairs are really not as complex as the financial industry would like you to believe. That's why there's so many things in the financial markets that are really designed to take people's power away from them and make them think that they're not smart enough to understand it, and therefore they need some intermediary to help them. Where the reality is, if you have a solid monetary base and you have a good structure where, as I said earlier, where a dollar equals a dollar for the rest of your life, you can plan a lot better. You can really get a handle on what your financial future means. So thank you for starting it. Thank you for being with me. And I'm sure that in weeks or months, we will visit again. There'll probably be a lot of questions that come into your website, and we'll be asking more and more, but we're here to help. And whenever you feel the need, you can go ahead and contact me or any member of the LODE community to further this discussion.
Very much appreciated. Very much appreciated. And yeah, I'd love to pick this up again and have another conversation very soon. I think, yeah, you mentioned it before, like people suffer due to lack of knowledge. So the more we can educate ourselves and the others around us on what's happening at the moment and where we're going, the better we'll be prepared for what's about to happen.
Exactly.
So appreciate it very much. Thanks for having us, David.
You're welcome.